You won't believe what happened to me when the HOA slapped me with a $250,000 fine for supposed violations on my own land. At first, I was completely shocked. I thought maybe there was some mistake or misunderstanding. How could this happen? I was just trying to enjoy my property, but suddenly it felt like the entire neighborhood was turning against me. The letters kept coming, each one more serious than the last, threatening legal action and more fines if I didn't comply. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But then, something even more unbelievable came to light. As I started digging deeper into the situation, I found out that I actually owned the entire neighborhood. Yes, the whole thing. The very people trying to force me out and fine me were living on land that legally belongs to me. Imagine that. It's wild, confusing, and honestly kind of scary. Who would have thought that behind all these accusations, I was the real property owner all along? This story isn't just about fines or property disputes. It's about power, control, and the strange dynamics that happen when people don't really know who owns what. I've been caught in this tangled mess between the HOA and myself, and things are only getting more complicated. What started as a simple conflict over land violations has turned into something much bigger, with legal battles, secrets, and some serious surprises waiting to be uncovered. I'm going to take you through every step of this crazy journey. The fines, the discoveries, and what it means for me and the neighborhood. But for now, I'll leave you with this. How could the HOA not know they're living on my land? And what's going to happen when the truth finally comes out? Stay tuned, because the next part of this story will blow your mind. Before this whole mess started, I thought I knew exactly what my property was and where my boundaries ended. I bought the land years ago, thinking it was a quiet, straightforward investment. It was my little piece of peace, away from the noise of city life. I spent weekends fixing up the place, planting trees, and just enjoying the open space. I never expected that the neighborhood around me, the houses, the streets, even the parks could somehow be part of my property too. It felt impossible. The HOA had always been strict, but distant. They sent rules and guidelines about fences, landscaping, and parking, but I never paid much attention. Then the letters came, accusing me of serious violations, building structures without approval, encroaching on common areas, and even disturbing protected zones. The fines were huge, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I couldn't believe it. I tried reaching out to them, but all I got were cold responses and threats of legal action. It felt like they wanted me gone, no matter what. So I started digging into the records, looking for answers. That's when the real mystery began. The property deeds, maps, and legal documents didn't add up the way the HOA claimed. Instead, they showed something shocking. The land the entire neighborhood sits on is legally mine. Every single lot, street, and sidewalk falls under my name. How did the HOA get so confident to fine me millions for violating rules on land I actually own? And why haven't they said anything about it? I'm still trying to figure out how this happened and what it means. Is this an honest mistake, a scam, or something else entirely? The more I uncover, the more questions I have, and the HOA's silence only makes it harder. The tension is building, and I'm caught in the middle of something much bigger than I expected. This story is far from over, and the next steps could change everything. As I dug deeper into the HOA's records and talked to a few neighbors, the situation started to get even more tangled. Some of the homeowners had no idea about the land ownership issue. They believed the HOA was just the usual neighborhood association, managing common spaces and setting rules. But if I actually own the land, what does that mean for them? Could their homes and yards be technically on my property? The thought alone was overwhelming. I also started hearing rumors about past disputes between the HOA board members and former Owners, apparently, there had been some shady deals and possibly forged documents in the past. Could those be connected to why the HOA acted so aggressively towards me? Was someone trying to keep me in the dark while controlling the neighborhood for their own benefit? The more I learned, the more it seemed like this wasn't just about a simple fine or land violation anymore. There were bigger forces at play, and I felt like a pawn caught in the middle. Meanwhile, the pressure kept mounting. The HOA wasn't just sending letters anymore. They threatened to take me to court and even cut off my access to utilities if I didn't pay up. The stress was intense, and I started wondering if fighting back was even worth it. Some neighbors began avoiding me, worried about getting caught up in the dispute or losing their own homes. It felt like the community was slowly dividing because of this mess. On top of all this, I hired a lawyer to help me sort through the legal maze. But even with professional advice, things were complicated. Property law, HOA rules, and local regulations mixed together in ways that made it hard to predict what could happen next. The lawyer warned me that this fight might take years, and even if I win, the damage to relationships and peace of mind could be long-lasting. At this point, I'm stuck in a whirlwind of questions, threats, and secrets. The truth feels just out of reach, and the stakes keep rising. How far will this conflict go? And who really controls this neighborhood? The answers might change everything, but I'm still waiting to uncover them. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the neighborhood grew thicker by the hour. The HOA escalated their threats, sending more urgent notices demanding the $250,000 fine be paid immediately. They even posted warnings about possible liens on my property and the risk of foreclosure. Meanwhile, whispers in the community were spreading fast. Some neighbors were taking sides. Others were quietly watching, unsure who to trust. The once peaceful street now felt like a powder keg ready to explode. I was barely sleeping, my mind racing with every new piece of information and every phone call from lawyers or concerned neighbors. Every time I thought I was getting closer to the truth, something else popped up: missing documents, conflicting records, strange disappearances of key files. It felt like someone was deliberately trying to bury the real story to keep me confused and powerless. And the more I pressed, the more I sensed I was poking a hornet's nest. One evening, I received a cryptic message from an anonymous neighbor who claimed to have proof that could change everything. They warned me to be careful, saying that the HOA board had a lot more control behind the scenes than anyone realized. Suddenly, this wasn't just about land or fines any. It was about power, secrets, and maybe even corruption at the same time. My lawyer found a loophole buried in old property laws that could work in my favor, but it was risky and complicated. Using it could trigger a legal battle that would drain time and money, but ignoring it meant losing everything I cared about. I was standing at a crossroads, feeling the weight of every decision. The next meeting with the HOA board was scheduled, and everyone expected fireworks. Neighbors were whispering about confrontations, lawsuits, and the possibility of the whole neighborhood's future hanging in the balance. I knew that whatever happened next could change my life forever, whether I'd finally clear my name or get crushed under the weight of these massive fines. The stage was set. The tension was unbearable, and the truth was closer than ever. But what would actually come out when I faced the HOA? The answer could blow this whole thing wide open or bury it forever, just when I thought I had braced myself for everything. The story took a sharp turn I never saw coming. A few days before the big HOA meeting, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a thick folder of documents, maps, and emails that seemed to reveal something explosive. Evidence that the HOA's own attorney had been involved in manipulating property records years ago. According to these files, certain lots were intentionally left off the official deeds, and those changes conveniently benefited a handful of board members who stood to gain financially from the confusion. It wasn't just a fight over land anymore. It was starting to look like a full-blown scheme. This revelation threw everything into chaos. Suddenly, the massive fine wasn't just an unfair penalty, looked like part of a larger plan to bully me out and keep control of the neighborhood's land under the radar. The stakes skyrocketed, and I realized I wasn't just battling an HOA. I was up against a web of lies, corruption, and possibly even fraud. The people who were supposed to manage and protect the community were the ones playing dirty, and I was caught in the middle. As I prepared for the upcoming confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Strange cars appeared near my house. Neighbors I didn't know started asking questions, and my phone kept buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it felt. The conflict wasn't just about ownership anymore. It had become personal, and I had no idea how far those involved would go to keep their secrets safe. Now, the HOA meeting looming and these new bombshells in my hands, the pressure is overwhelming. Every move feels like it could be the one that changes everything or ruins me completely. I'm standing at the edge of a cliff, and the next steps could bring the truth crashing down or bury me beneath it. The tension has never been higher, and the fig? The day of the HOA meeting finally arrived, and the room was packed with nervous neighbors, tense board members, and a few legal representatives. I stood there with a folder of documents in my hands, the evidence that could change everything. When I laid out the proof of manipulated property records and shady deals, the room went silent. The faces of the board members shifted from confident to defensive, and some even tried to deny the claims, but the documents were hard to ignore. As the discussion heated up, it became clear that the HOA's aggressive fines and threats were a part of a plan to keep control over land they didn't legally own. The board members' scheme was exposed, and suddenly, I wasn't the one in trouble. I was the rightful owner fighting to reclaim what was mine. The neighbors, many of whom had been wary or unsure before, started to rally behind me, realizing they had been misled all along. Just when I thought the battle was won, the unexpected happened. One of the longtime neighbors, someone quiet and mostly uninvolved until now, stood up and revealed a shocking secret. They held an old deed dating back decades, showing that while I did own the land beneath the neighborhood, there was a clause buried deep in the paperwork, one that could change ownership depending on how the land was used or developed. It meant that even with all the evidence, the fight wasn't over. There was still a legal question about whether the HOA could claim parts of the land if certain conditions had been met years ago. The room went from relief to confusion in seconds. The victory I thought I had was complicated by this new twist, and suddenly the future of the neighborhood was more uncertain than ever. I realized that this wasn't just a simple story about land and fines. It was a long and complicated fight where every answer only led to more questions. Even though the conflict wasn't fully settled, the truth was finally out in the open. I had challenged the system, exposed corruption, and gained support from the community. But the next chapter of this story is still unwritten, and the stakes are higher than ever. What happens next will decide everything. After the meeting ended, I realized this battle was far from over, but I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. The community had started to see the truth behind the HOA's actions, and many neighbors reached out to support me. We began working together to hire experts, review the old deeds, and prepare for what could be a long legal fight. The tension didn't disappear overnight, but the fear and isolation I felt at the start began to lift. Looking back, this experience taught me a lot about property ownership, community, and standing up for what's right. It showed me how complicated land disputes can be, especially when power and money get involved. Most importantly, it reminded me that even when the odds seem stacked against you, persistence and knowledge can make a difference. The $250,000 Fine turned out to be a catalyst for uncovering deeper problems in the neighborhood's management tissues many of us had ignored or didn't know about. By facing this challenge head-on, I helped shine a light on those problems. And I believe it started a conversation that will change things for the better, even with the unresolved legal questions. The neighborhood is beginning to heal. People are talking openly. The HOA board is under new scrutiny, and there's a real push for transparency. What started as a fight over fines became a story about community, empowerment, and the importance of knowing your rights. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're facing unfair treatment or confusing property issues, remember this story. Don't be afraid to ask questions, dig into the facts, and seek help. Sometimes, the biggest challenges lead to the most important breakthroughs. This story might have its twists and turns, but in the end, it's about standing your ground and fighting for what's right, no matter how complicated things get.